Welcome to 31 Thoughts, the podcast. Jeff Marek alongside Elliotte Friedman. The podcast is presented, as always, by GMC. And today, Elliotte, a little bit of a diversion away from capital H hockey, although we'll talk plenty about puck today with our guest. Phil Brooks has one of the most interesting business cards of anyone you will meet. On it, it says pro wrestler, it says MMA fighter, it says actor. But CM Punk, when I asked the first question, what do you think you do for a living? What's your answer?
I am a dog father. I am father to Larry and husband to April. I think that's the most important thing, and that's how I think that's what I'm focused on right now. You know, that's every day, and I'm fortunate enough to fill in the holes: wrestling, fighting, talking, writing. You know, you forgot. I'm a writer too. You forgot that on the card.
There's a lot. That's a big business card.
Yeah.
Bon vivant, man about.
We're supposed to prepare for these podcasts.
The bringer of donuts.
Yeah. I'm a man about town.
Yeah.
Stan's Donuts. Shout out.
The one thing that I think a lot of people, and I include myself as one, I'm really admire about you, and we talk about this a lot on our podcast, not just about hockey players, but about just life in general, is growing by getting out of your comfort zones. And you said something really interesting to me yesterday here at Media Day in Chicago. You said, I'm only comfortable when I'm uncomfortable. That's a great saying. Have you always been that way? Has that always been part of, I don't want to be comfortable, I don't want to settle into anything?
Yeah, I don't know how great it is. I think it's a great thing to be accustomed to that. You know what I mean? But that I think that's just the way life has prepared me thus far. And then when I have, quote unquote, a day off or nothing to do, I go absolutely banana. Like, I'll freak out. So right. I always have to be doing something. And to me, the growth happens when you're out of your comfort zone. You know, when you're not just sitting on your couch, when you're out doing something new. I think when you stop learning, you're regressing.
So that's your default setting then?
I believe so. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Like, when you're a kid, you imagine yourself doing all these things in your life. You have dreams. We all do. And how many of our lives turn out to be kind of what we imagine that they would be? As someone who's been able to do all of these things or attempt all of these things, I'm curious, when you were 7 or 8 years old and you dreamt about what your life would be, how close did it turn out to with what it actually was?
I don't know. It was a long time ago. It's hard to remember with vivid detail. I guess I was a normal kid, and I probably dreamed of being a baseball player, because I think that's predominantly what I did when I was a kid. But you know, certain things happen in your life, and you know, life throws you curveballs and obstacles, and you know, holes to dig yourself out of. And I wound up being a professional wrestler, you know, and to me, like, no matter what I was doing, I always just wanted to be the best one. Before I knew of inspirational quotes, and long before there was an Instagram, you know, to me, I was always just out. So I guess that's the competitor in me. I was always out to be the best, whatever I was, you know, and I don't know if I dreamed when what are you going to be when you're 40? I probably thought I'd be dead at least, or, you know, but I think it turned out okay. I also don't know if I'm the kind of person who looks that far into the future. You know, it's hard for me to tell you where I'm going to be in 10 years.
Because I think there's probably a lot of people out there who, like, we all watched wrestling when we were younger, right?
Yeah.
There was a day where I wished I could have been a pro wrestler. I bet, like, MMA became big. Like, I remember watching, you know, Royce Gracie when it first started, but I was in my 20s. I bet you there's people out there who are young right now who say, I wish I could, I would love to be an MMA fighter. So I was wondering, did you never thought about being a wrestler when you were a kid?
No, I for sure did. I kind of liken it to being in a band. I didn't know how to do it, So you wind up just screwing around with your friends in the backyard after a pay-per-view, right?
Yeah.
You're excited. You're a bunch of high energy kids, and
Put
you
out
just
the mattresses.
I mean, I just body slam your buddy on the lawn, like, and that's just kind of how it all started. That was the nucleus of it all.
What was your finishing move when you were a kid?
I don't think I had one. I think I lost all the time. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You made up for it later.
Yeah. But no lie, I was CM Punk.
Like you weren't Ric Flair.
No, that was my name when I was 15 years old, rolling around in the backyard.
What are your earliest memories as a kid? We talked about this a little bit yesterday. I was spoiled early. So the first main event I ever saw was Maple Leaf Gardens.
Wrestling memories.
Wrestling memories. Well, my first main event I ever saw was U.S. Mid-Atlantic title. Crockett Promotions running in conjunction with Tunney in Toronto. So top 3 cards had to be Mid-Atlantic matches. Main event was Flair Steamboat. And I remember watching the match, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it was, and it was brilliant. Those two were fantastic together. What a pair. Put on some of the best matches the industry's ever seen. And I remember getting back on the subway and going home with my dad and thinking to myself, wrestling's amazing, assuming that all wrestling was like that. Little did I know that I had just seen a piece of maybe the best in-ring feud the industry has ever seen.
Yeah, they ruined you early.
They ruined me early. Then I see another main event, and it's like, well, that wasn't Flair Steamboat. And I've been saying my entire life, well, that wasn't Flair Steamboat. What were some of the early ones for you? Like, that's where I got the bug. Was that match specifically?
You were fortunate. I am a kid from Chicago, so I was predominantly WWF kid, right? So early memories were Saturday night's main event, thinking it was on every Saturday and realizing it wasn't. Kind of had to find wrestling to watch, so it was always in the morning, Sunday or Saturday.
Wrestling was always big Chicago though, like Dumont Network. Like this stretches back decades.
It was AWA when we were kids.
Yeah, but see, that was before my time, right? I don't think I had cable when I was a kid, unless we were stealing it, which did happen. But yeah, those were my earliest memories. And I don't have early memories of going to live shows. That just didn't happen. So everything was what I saw on television or what the kids were talking about at the lunch table at school. And the earliest memory I have of that is who's going to win, Hogan or the Ultimate Warrior.
And do you remember watching that Mania when Hogan put him over?
I for sure didn't watch it, so I had to go to school the next day to find out who won. Yeah, we couldn't afford the pay-per-views, so I got my info from the kids at school. And that's also how I found out, well, wrestling's not cool anymore, because literally probably 6 months to a year later, none of the other kids were talking about wrestling anymore. And I was like,
hey, over here.
Who won that pay-per-view? Give me my spoilers. Like, what's going on?
Of all the things you've tried, what is the thing that you're proudest of that you attempted?
Without a doubt, fighting, I think.
See, like I watched Conor McDavid and Mayweather.
McGregor.
Sorry,
I would watch Conor McDavid.
Yeah.
I'd watch Conor McDavid box.
That is the ultimate Freudian slip that I'm ever going to do on this podcast. Keep that in, Amal. Don't change that.
Me and my friend Lou do that all the time on purpose to drive people crazy.
That's so funny that I did that.
You'll drive the MMA fans crazy calling McGregor McDavid. And hockey fans will call him McGregor,
That's
and they're
awesome.
like, "Oh, you're stupid! It's McDavid." It's we just sit there and laugh.
I'm just stupid. I did it on purpose. And I remember watching it with some buddies, and they're like, "This is so boring," and I was fascinated by it because I couldn't believe that if you make a mistake in there, the consequences are life threatening.
Yeah,
and I could not believe that he had the guts to do that. Like, I was so impressed by that. So I get it. But were you ever scared for your health?
No. I knew I had a very small window of opportunity, right? And like, as I talk to you now, I don't know, a month and a half, I'm going to be 41. And people ask me all the time, oh, when are you going to fight again? And my answer, I'm always brutally honest to a fault. My answer is, well, I don't know, because I did two training camps and they were rough because I was older and I started much, much later than you probably should. And I'm fighting in the UFC. Let's not even ask the question whether I should or shouldn't be. I didn't care what anybody's opinion was, if I should or shouldn't be there. I was like, well, here it is. It's in my hand. I have to seize this opportunity. So I don't know if I'd be able to survive a training camp at my age right now, but I would not change anything for the world. I was never scared of my health or my well-being. I just wanted to make it to that finish line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolute sense.
This goes back to getting out of comfort zones, and I can't imagine anything more uncomfortable or a bigger jump than doing pretty much anything to getting in a cage and fighting. So one of my best friends in the world is Sean Pearson, who had, I think, 7 fights at welterweight UFC. Our kids play hockey together. We live in the same town. We've become great friends. And I work out with Sean, and I've asked him this question a couple of different times, and he's always sort of shrugged it off. He's got that wrestling mentality of just go forward, whatever. Fear doesn't enter the equation. I can't imagine what it feels like. You can. The moment the door closes. I will never experience that. You have twice at the highest level. What goes through your mind when the door closes and it's you, another man, and a referee who might have to save someone's life?
I think at that point, the 2 times I've done it, my training just took over. It was instinct, I don't think I'm thinking about what happens. The reason these guys in the NHL practice their shot, 1,000 times a day is so when they get in that high pressure game situation,
right?
It's just second nature. It just happens. And I think that's why you train. That's why you drill. So when those moments come, it just happens. And that's where I was in those moments.
What's the line? Excellence is mundane.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing. It's whoever has done that one thing the most times and just made it part of their vocabulary.
Yeah, I'm not scared of the guy who does 10,000 kicks. I'm scared of the guy who does the one kick 10,000 times.
Right.
Yeah.
We should explain, CM, why you're here today. So how did this all happen?
Well, Phil is a great hockey fan.
First of all, I can't call you Phil. Just so you know.
That's fine. I don't care.
I can't do that. I see you. I see CM Punk. I can't call you Phil. So I hope that's okay.
That's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here's why I do. And this is from a lifetime ago when I used to host a wrestling radio show. I always had a hard time using work names because I always said to myself, if I had a chance to talk to Tom Cruise, I would never call him Jerry Maguire.
Right.
Why would I? I will call him Tom Cruise.
Tom, sure.
Right? Call him by his real name. So I know some guys like to just call me my work name, I've always had do you have a preference?
I leave it up to the individual. I don't know if I've ever introduced myself to anybody as Punk, just because then if they don't know you, then you gotta explain it. And it's just, I like the duality of Phil or Punk.
Yeah.
Like, hi, Phil, that's my white accountant name. And Punk, that's my business name. I was a huge G.I. Joe kid growing up. So it's just my code name,
So
okay,
Phil
so
/ Punk is here at the NHL Media Car Wash, parading hockey players in and out as we promote this upcoming 2019-2020 NHL season. When you're in Chicago, there's a number of things you should do and a number of people you should probably meet. And I still think that sports fans should meet as many people from other sports as possible. And I'm not sure whose idea it was to call you Phil, but it makes a lot of sense to have you sit in on interviews with Chicago Blackhawks players. One, because you'll ask smarter questions than Elliotte and I. And two,
True.
I'm sure those players are sick of hearing from me and Elliotte.
True.
Yeah, I don't know.
How did it come together from your end? I just got a call from one of our producers, George, said, hey.
George emailed me. I think I talked to George in the past about, like my availability and my interest in doing anything. And I'm at a point in my life where if you see me doing anything, then the people at home know that chances are there's not any assholes involved, because I don't have time for it. I don't have time for people's like negativity, politics, drama, like whatever. And he just asked me to come, and like this is right up my alley. I live 2 miles down the street. I don't got to travel. I'm thrilled, honestly, believe it or not, to meet both of you guys, to sit here and talk.
Okay, yeah.
No, it's true. It's true.
Just happy to be here in Cleveland. You're the Mick Foley hometown pop.
Drive my wife crazy. Like, my wife doesn't hate you guys, but when she sees you guys on the television, she's just like, oh, it's that show where the old guys are just talking about hockey.
Hey, come on. I'm not that old. Give me a break.
And I'm not either, but she buys me once a year. I get a coffee mug that says grandpa on it. So, that's the kind of humor she has. And it's just, I'll watch you guys, and she's not a sports girl. So she just doesn't get it. She doesn't, just the 4 guys sitting there.
But you've taken her to sporting events.
I've taken her to the biggest sporting events in the past decade.
So you told me the story about taking her to the Cubs win.
Yeah.
Can you share that story with our listeners? It's great.
I brought my lovely wife, who would probably rather, get her legs waxed than sit through a baseball game. And I brought her to Cleveland to watch the Cubs play the Indians. And I've taken her to Cubs games, and she's happy if she can get nachos, but she just doesn't. It's just not her thing. So, but I like it's duality. Like, here I am freaking out. I'm stressed out. I'm chewing on my fingers. Yeah. I got to wear the same pair of socks. Rally hats, like all this stuff. And I watched the Cubs, lose 3 games. They're down 3-1. And I'm like, babe, we got to go to Cleveland. And she's just like, okay, can I get nachos? I said, yeah. So we went to Cleveland, you know what I mean? And she sat there and she put up with everything, the rain delay, all of it. And when they won, I think she gets a kick out of watching me cry.
Did you cry when they won?
Oh God. Yeah, I couldn't help it. It was automatic. And I looked down at her, and she was on her phone, and she got all excited, and I was like, oh, we're sharing in this moment. The Cubs have finally won the World Series, 108 years. Yeah. And she showed me on her phone, she had caught the elusive Pokemon on the Pokemon game. And I was just like, this is why I love my wife.
Well, you shared a great moment. The Cubs won the World Series, and she caught her elusive Pokemon.
Got Charmander, or whoever, with the
in
secret,
your own way, you
Cleveland
both accomplished
Pokemon.
what you needed to do.
Yes. That was a bulletproof win-win for both of you.
Yes.
And and that Cubs win too. And I'm watching this, from afar. I'm watching it in my house, and just a little bit north of the city of Toronto. And the stories that came out after about people who, mom and dad, if they were still here, would have been so happy. There was one story that I saw, I can't remember which news program it was, about someone that went to their father's grave with a radio and listened to the game.
Yeah,
it's that way. And even just saying it now, like I'm getting, and I'm not even, emotionally attached to the Cubs. Just thought it was a wonderful story. What was it like for you? And what was it like? Take us back to the city.
Wrigley let people, there was an entire, I want to say it was maybe the south wall of Wrigley Field, and the brick on the sidewalk. You were allowed to write messages, and it became a memorial. I'm getting choked up thinking about it, and it became a memorial where people, left pictures, wrote family members' names, like, hey, Mom, we did it. It was a big thing. And I think my wife sees stuff like that, and then that helps her understand why I get so crazy about playoff baseball or playoff hockey, or just hockey or baseball in general. I think she sees that, and she draws the the line. You know, it's the human emotion and the connection that people have with it, and she gets to eat nachos at a lot of these. She saw she saw the Hawks hoist the cup here on home ice. She saw that, you know. How'd
that go over?
Great. I mean, she was like, "They won. Could we go?" And like, I stayed so late, like watching like individual players, know. And but then again, she was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Oh wait, Keith's got his kid on the ice," and you can see like, "Oh, there's Sharp. He's got his kid." You see the fans or the players have their kids out on the ice, and then she's like, "Ah, okay, that's sweet. I get it."
Well, your wife is like my son. Like Max, we just came from a trip down California, went to go see the Giants and Padres, and he got popcorn out of it. So he was just as happy. Now you have, and we'll take a photo of it so we can tweet it out with the link to the podcast. You have one particular Stanley Cup of the Blackhawks tattooed on your left ankle, is it?
Yeah.
And there's one particular year of the 3 they won recently that you put there.
Yeah.
Why did you pick 2013?
So I got the cup, and you'll all see the picture. There's a banner on the cup, and it says "My Summer Vacation." It's because I was at a time in my life where I had never taken a break. I mean, I started wrestling in '97. I got signed by the WWE in 2005. I moved to Philly in 2001, 2002, all pursuing this goal of wrestling. And my goal was always, as corny as it sounds, is just to be happy. I was never eye on the prize like WWE guy. I wanted to wrestle in Japan. They got 2, 3, 4 week tours, and they come home for 2, 3 weeks. I thought that was great to be able to have a degree of anonymity at home, but to go somewhere else and be a superhero. That just sounded great. And all my heroes wrestled there, Eddie, Benoit. I was a big Japanese wrestling fan at the time. And it turned out I got told by Hashimoto that I was too big to be a junior, and I wasn't big enough to be a heavyweight. And then they kept doing the "see you next tour" thing, and I was just like, "Oh man, all right." So I needed to make something for myself at home, very punk rock and very do-it-yourself. I worked for Ring of Honor, and I was just like, "We got to make this place somewhere special," and we did. And then I just kind of feel like it was a mountain I climbed and I conquered, and it's when you realize there's another plateau, and I was making a living wrestling, and I didn't care about anything else. But then there's that competitive edge in me to find out if I can do something, and so I set a goal for myself to get into the best shape of my life and make it so the WWE couldn't say no to me. And I got hired. Fast forward, I'm on the road from 2006 all the way to 2013, nonstop. I have a couple surgeries in there where they keep me on the road, cutting promos, doing what I can in the ring. I'm mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally exhausted. I have a match with The Undertaker at WrestleMania. I destroyed my knee. I didn't need surgery, and for the first time, they let me go home, and I rediscovered life. You know what I mean? Like, being home planted the seeds for me to be like, I got to get out of here. Why haven't they given me time off? And even then, like, my vacation was cut short. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to come back at SummerSlam. They made me come back June? Something like that. I don't know. And I was like, I got these hockey games to see, But anyway, long story short, that cup run, just going to those games and watching Siebes score that overtime winner when they were down, 3-1, just being in the crowd with fellow, maniac Blackhawks fans. It rekindled my love. I loved hockey, but you become detached from everything when you're in the wrestling bubble. Mm-hmm. Wrestling was all I did. Wrestling was all I knew. And I was all of a sudden outside of the bubble. You know, I didn't have to fly anywhere. I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have a boss. And I had, to me, which is the most valuable thing in the world, I had time. And I spent it following the Blackhawks around, going to every single game I could. And then eventually, you know, I was back on the road already when they won. But that ended with them inviting me the day they got home from Boston to go out with them that night. And it's got to be a first in the history of the world, a straight edge kid hanging out with the Stanley Cup champions all night. I stayed out with them. We started at Harry Carey's, like on Randolph, and we went everywhere. And I would just shuffle on buses and be sandwiched up against, Bolig, and just, you wind up talking to whoever. I was at some nightclub watching everybody freak out and dance, and I just had my back against the wall, and I looked to my left, and there's Ray Emery, and you'd just be like, "Hey man, what's up?" And they all treated me like so sweet. That was my summer vacation. I had never had one, and that was it. And it was just very special to me. And the way the players have always treated me, and the way the organization has always treated me, they made me feel special when I've never asked for that. I don't ask for any special treatment. To me, I'm a fan. I go to the games when I can, and I root for the team, And so that year was very special for me. And, I got to hoist the cup, and I did not want to. I was very superstitious about doing that. I did not win. I was not on the ice. I did not skate. I did not want to be Jim Belushi. Taves and Sharpie grabbed that cup and shoved it into my chest. They're like, "Lift it, kid." And I was like, "Okay." Captain told me to do it, so I had to do it.
Was it heavier than you thought it would be? That's
no,
what most guys say.
I knew it was 35 pounds, so I knew.
He's lifted the Undertaker. He can lift the Stanley Cup.
I was prepared.
Yeah, but the Stanley Cup doesn't post up when you're in a body slam.
Neither does the Undertaker.
There's a couple of things in there. I know you've got wonderful stories about a number of wrestlers, and I do want to talk about your love of Japanese wrestling. But I want to get your thoughts. On one thing that Roddy Piper told me. And I want to ask you about announcers and how you feel about announcers in various sports, whether it's professional wrestling, whether it's MMA, whether it's hockey. So I spent a crazy weekend a lifetime ago with Roddy Piper. And he said a lot of things that were off the wall, crazy. But one thing he said to me really stuck. And I thought, this was brilliant. We were talking about getting to the ring, right? So coming out from behind the curtain to the ring. And this is the era where most guys are house on fire, run down the ramp, get into the ring as fast as you can, hit the ropes a couple of times, big cheer, all of it. Whole thing takes about 45 seconds. Piper would walk slow and deliberate and would stop, look around, and look at the crowd and pick up his walk again. First of all, I thought it was cool as hell, totally different. I said, "What's behind that? Like, what's your thinking on that?" And he said, twofold. He grew up in the territory days, and he said, one, I was always good at counting houses. So I knew how many people were in the building. So I knew what my payoff should be, and I knew if I was getting screwed on it or not. And two, if I'm on TV, it's the announcer's job to talk about me as I get to the ring. If I only give them 30 seconds of getting to the ring, then they only talk about me for 30 seconds. If I give them 2 minutes of a slow walk, it's their job for 2 minutes to talk about me. And by the time I hit the ring, I am a god, because these guys have been forced to talk about me for 2 minutes. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. What do you think of that?
I mean, he was one of the smarter guys that I had ever fortunately been able to talk to, so that it's no surprise to me. That just makes sense to me. I don't think enough people in the wrestling business today look at the business from that kind of perspective. I think a lot of people are there doing what they saw somebody else do on television. That's why it's just it feels washed. It feels repeated. I'd bet that Piper probably also did that because nobody else was.
Yeah. To be different.
He'd watch everybody run to the ring. What's the opposite of that? That's how I thought when I was in WWE. Like I did a lot of things just because I never, like, nobody else was doing them, even if I didn't do it. I didn't throw a lot of kicks when I was on the indies, but I went into the WWE looking at the landscape of nobody's throwing kicks. Okay, so I'm going to do that. Literally, I don't think I did a springboard in Ring of Honor, but I got to the WWE and I was like, nobody's doing this, so I'm going to do that, and it will, moves at the end of the day don't mean shit. But if you can pick 3 things that you do differently than everybody else, you stand out. And the entrance is a perfect example of that.
Okay, so I was close friends with the guys in the Radicals. Okay, so I was close with Benoit, close with Eddie, close with Dean, and close with Perry. So I helped make a lot of the phone calls. Jimmy Corderas writes about this in his book. I made a lot of the phone calls to WWE when they indicated, remember Chris called me and said, I'm done, I want to go. Can you call someone for us? I called Jim and they put me on to Pritchard. And I remember being at a house show in Toronto, and Dean was working Scotty Too Hottie. And I think Pat was the agent, Pat Patterson. And Dean's like, well, come on, I'll take you backstage and walk you through, and we're going to walk you through how we're going to put this match together. And Pat was like, well, what do you want to do? And Dean was a general, the veteran guy. And Dean said, I'm going to get heat with a headlock. And Pat's like, what? Like, we got like 20,000 people here, and you're gonna get heat on a headlock. He goes, I'm gonna get on a headlock. And Scotty's like, well, do whatever. And so they get to the ring, and so they do, lock up, back to the corner, and then hit the ropes a bit. And then after about 2 minutes, Dean grabs a headlock and takes Scotty down and sits on it. The crowd's getting real uncomfortable. 30 seconds go by, a minute goes by, and here come the boring chants. And Dean sits on it, cranks it up a little bit more. And the boos and the boring chants are over the top. Dean couldn't care. And by the time Scotty starts his comeback, after, no joke, like, this is like 3 or 4, maybe 5 minutes of a headlock.
Brilliant.
Place goes nuts. And Dean comes back, and all the boys are laughing, and Dean's the smartest guy in the room. And I'm like, Dean, that was amazing. He goes, most kids, the younger kids, the minute they hear boring,
Got to do a spot.
Got to do a spot, go to a spot. He said, you just sit on it. And I was blown away.
Well, the thing about television time too is just like, I don't think people in the ring realize or think anymore about how expensive that time is. The advertising dollars and the money. So if Vince puts you on TV, he's investing, depending on what time you have, hundreds of thousands of dollars into you right there. So you have to know, I don't know if anybody's bold enough to go out there and do things that are outside of the box. Because if you do that, it has to be good. You could go out there and instead of doing what everybody else does nowadays, where they walk out to the top of the ramp and they pose, they walk halfway down the ramp and they pose, they get to the bottom of the ramp and then they pose, and then they get to the steps and then they pose, and then everybody gets on the ropes and they pose, and then they get in the ring and they face the hard camera and they do their little dance or their pose or whatever like that. It's just like, okay, yeah, I get it. Why isn't there anybody back there going, God, everybody's doing this, I'm not going to? It would get everybody in that building to go, oh, that's different. Whether they know it or not, it's subconscious. But if you step outside that box, you have to be confident enough in your abilities to know that what you're doing is good. Because if it isn't good, then you're in trouble. If it's good, no problem.
You and I have a mutual love for, and maybe one day Elliotte will join the club, Inc.
Yeah.
And I know you have something done for the late Mizuhara Misawa, which is very cool. I know you're perhaps planning something for Harley Race.
Yep, the Harley tattoo is in motion, so to speak.
We spoke to Patrick Kane earlier today, and you showed him your Stanley Cup tattoo. How many sports tattoos do you have?
Oh, that's a great question. For sure, 2. I got the cup for the Hawks, and I got a little goat after the Cubs won the World Series. I guess the Masawa boot would be number 3. I don't know if I have any other wrestling related tattoos. Definitely going to get the Harley one memorialized. Me and 2 other people who are close with Harley are gonna get that.
How many pieces are just impulse pieces?
A lot. I think when you get to this stage, it just turns into, it depends on who you're with and what time it is. I was eating ramen with a friend of mine, and we were catching up, and it just turned into this ramen extravaganza. We're, by the way, free plug for High Five Ramen here in Chicago. Tiny little hole in the wall. Those
are the best places.
Very Japanese oriented. I mean, you can't fit 12 people in this place, so you got to wait. You put your name on the list and you wait. They have a specific ramen on the menu. They tell you not to order. They just say, just don't order this. It's too spicy. It's too hot. Don't order it. So that's, I always find that's interesting. No, I don't, I'm not, I like spicy, but I'm wise now. They're telling me not to order it. I'm not going to order it.
They call you gaijin when you come in?
No, it's all a bunch of white people. But we were eating ramen, and there was a couple next to us, and this is right when they passed the bill that allowed same-sex marriage. So there was a lesbian couple next to us who were eating ramen, and they could see that me and my friend were having trouble deciding what to order, and so they graciously said, "Well, they grabbed the fresh bowl, and they said, "Here, try this. This is what we got." And it was great. And we wound up, having dinner with them, finding out that they are essentially on their honeymoon because they just got married because it was just legally made, so. Huh. And I said, well, I'm the ramen master of Chicago. You got to go here. Their honeymoon was hitting different ramen places. So I gave them a bunch of recommendations, and, I just thought it was a lovely story. And then me and my friend Nora were like, ramen tattoos right now. Let's go. And we left and went down the street. Yeah. And got ramen tattoos.
And
it's on my wrist. Yeah. I mean, and that's just the way it works now. Tattoos are, to me, it's like a receipt and a roadmap for where you've been in life. And a lot of them tell stories. So like I will get them to memorialize people or events, such as the Stanley Cup run in the summer, my summer vacation, and different things. So, I think Harley was a big piece of my career, whether people realize it or not. And I just, he's somebody who deserves to be memorialized, I feel.
Let's pick up on Harley Race.
Okay.
I don't think he was the first, but I think he was one of the first wrestlers that Andre the Giant allowed to body slam him.
Andre was supposedly afraid of Harley. There was 2 guys that Andre supposedly, because obviously I never met Andre, just hear the stories.
Was Bad News one of them?
The stories, no.
Okay.
It was Harley and it was Haku.
Well, I know Haku was...
Those are the 2 that Andre, and people would tell me, oh, he was afraid of him. I don't know if he was afraid of him, but I knew he knew not to mess with him, right? So I think that speaks volumes. People always talk about how tough Harley was, and he was. He was just he could be a tough, mean son of a bitch.
Do you have a tough Harley story?
Just one thing about Harley Race. There's a pretty legendary story from where Harley Race is from, that the town was actually bullied by one particular person. There's a famous person in that area of the United States, and he was a bully, and he intimidated the whole city. And actually, this particular individual was murdered, an unsolved murder, and the police didn't even try to solve it. They were like, "We're better off without this guy." And one of the only people this person wouldn't bully was Harley Race. That's how tough he was.
Probably had something to do with his disappearance too. I wouldn't put it past him. Yeah, Quitman, Missouri. Yeah.
You have a tough Harley story?
I got a few. Harley had exceptional grip strength. And I wish there was a way I could vocalize it so people truly understood this, but you can't understand it unless he's grabbed a hold of you.
I remember watching old videos of Danny Hodge crushing apples.
So same thing, right?
Yeah.
I always hear the stories. Danny Hodge could get, behind you if you're in a referee's position, and in wrestling, guys would just howl out. Once the referee said go, he would just crush a guy's wrist. Like that's pretty. It's hard to.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I've shaken hands with Harley, and Harley's grabbed me by the back of the neck before. And it's otherworldly, I think when Brock picked me up, I think I kind of felt just a little bit of that Harley strength, which is to say something. Brock, in the prime of his life, in the prime of his career, when I knew Harley, he was, quote unquote, an old man by that point, but he's still, I mean, just his hands were just unbelievably strong. My favorite Harley story, this isn't necessarily a tough Harley story. I feel like everybody's got those tough Harley stories. Sure. And I was in a bar fight with Harley.
Did he flash KO anybody?
He did. Didn't spill a drop of his beer. Was holding his beer, holding the mug in one hand.
That's the most impressive part of the story.
KOing people, and like in between, like taking sips of the beer. Like it was almost just like he was bored with it. Like, I've seen this all before. I'll just, but my favorite Harley story, is, it was his birthday, and we were in the bar, and we're celebrating Harley's birthday. And then, all of a sudden the waitress comes up, and she's got a tray of shots. She puts the tray down, and she's putting shots in front of everybody. There must have been, I don't know, 22 of us in the bar. So it's just Harley and all the wrestlers. We just did a show in Eldon, Missouri, and we're in the bar hanging out, eating afterwards, and it's his birthday. So Harley got everybody shots, and the waitress puts one down in front of me, and I said, "Oh, can you get me a shot of like I don't know, whatever you got, like soda? I don't care, Coke, Pepsi. If you got cranberry juice, like whatever." And she was like, "Honey, Harley Race got you that shot. You got to drink it." Now, obviously, she doesn't know me. And I say, "I don't drink." And she's like, "Honey, Harley Race got you that shot." And I say, I understand that. I said, "But I don't drink." Right? And she's like, "Do you know who Harley Race is?" And I was like, "Do you know who I am? I just work for Harley. I know who Harley Race is. I appreciate the sentiment. I guess I'll just sip my water if we're making a toast." You know what I mean? She's going on and on and on, making a big deal about all this stuff. And finally, Harley comes over and explains to her, he's like, "Oh, he doesn't drink." And like, that was the end of it. She didn't say anything else. She just went, "Oh, okay, I didn't know." Even though I had already told her 1,000 times.
This was the voice of God.
It's supposed to be like this big slight, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to drink a shot, like, it's kind of the story throughout my entire WWE career. I think there was a lot of guys that didn't like me specifically because I didn't drink or eat pills, right? And here's Harley Race, tougher than all of them, more badass than all of them, more accomplished than all of them. And in a second, he didn't care. He was just like, "That's Punk. He doesn't drink. That's it. That was it." So like, that's kind of the moment where I was like, holy shit, this guy respects me. How cool is that? I've made it. I don't need anything else. Not money, not fame, not belts. Like this guy was the closest thing to a living hero. And then, so then I of course have to push the envelope. I felt a little bit left out. I didn't get a shot. Everybody else did. Harley toasted. Yeah. It's his birthday. So I walk up to the bar, I belly up, and I go, "Do you guys got milk?" And the bartender looks at me and she's like, "Yeah, we got milk." And I went, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I count everybody out, and I go, "I need 20 shots of milk." And she was just like, "Okay." Gives me the 20 shots of milk. Here I come with the big platter. I put it down. Everybody gets a shot of milk. And I remember Harley looking at the milk, looking at me, looking at the milk, and he just goes, "Is that milk. And I went, it sure is Harley Race. Happy fucking birthday. And nobody wanted to touch their milk until Harley picked it up and raised his glass, and everybody raised their glass.
That's awesome.
Cheers with Harley Race, shot of milk. So like that was my way of, it's always exciting when the straight edge kid can fit in somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, he made sure you could.
And it was
because he drank the milk.
It's a very difficult business to fit in if you don't drink or smoke or do drugs or,
Sounds like sportscasting.
It could just be being Canadian. I don't know. But yeah, so that it's a silly story like that meant the world to me. That like Harley didn't care. I didn't have to drink for him to make me, to make me one of the boys.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop me from riding in back of Harley on his boat, and every time he'd just be bouncing through waves and he would go, beer me, and I would have to reach and hand him a beer, and he would just take it from his back and just slam a beer. Like I never minded doing that. It wasn't me doing the drinking. So Harley's, I'm fortunate enough now to look back and realize that I have more than a handful of Harley Race stories, and how lucky I am to have those stories.
I grew up watching a lot of NWA, so I saw that version of Harley Race. Others saw the WWF version of Harley Race.
I'm still mad about the $25,000 bounty that Dick Slater and Cowboy Bob Orton collected against Ric Flair. Like, Orton and Flair were supposed to be friends. How could he do that to him? That was a great swerve.
One of the great things about Race 2, and they did this with the NWA title, is, listen, he helped make Flair with the title. Dusty Rhodes as well. I mean, I haven't followed it, wrestling, since I left doing the radio show. I glance every now and then. I go down wormholes for Japanese or old AWA or old NWA matches. How different is wrestling now than it was even 15 years ago? I'm just talking from a performer's point of view.
Yeah, I think you're probably better ask somebody who's there now. I mean, from when I got into the business to when I got signed by WWE, it was drastically different. From when I left, it had already changed, done a 180, and now I can only imagine it's even more different. It's probably completely alien to me by now.
Could there be a spot there still for you? They still by the way, they still chant your name.
Looking at it objectively and trying to put myself in somebody else's shoes, I absolutely think there could be. Just knowing how many people that they hire to micromanage everything, and how they have agents and producers and this, that. I think the best thing I was ever at, my greatest tool, was my mind, because I was never the most athletic. I certainly wasn't the biggest. I was kind of one of those. I imagine myself, like in baseball terms, I was like a 5-tool player, but I always just tried to tell the best stories and use my brain.
If you could drop yourself into one era against one opponent,
oh, this is good.
Who would it be, and when?
The opponent is probably more difficult. Actually, if I was to pick an opponent, it would be Austin. Obviously, everybody knows him as Stone Cold. I would probably rather wrestle Stunning Steve. But
WCW Steve.
Yeah, I mean, he was the best wrestler at that time. 94, like there was nobody better. For the sake of the big match, I think CM Punk, Steve Austin, so Attitude Era. But I always felt like I was a man out of time, and I was told that by a great many legends, Dusty, Harley, so many Funk, so many old school guys. I wrestled Dusty. Nobody knows this. It was
when did you wrestle Dusty?
It was a 6-man tag right before I signed my contract to WWE. So it was like this weird Florida convention. The match is completely insane and bizarre. It was myself, Kevin Sullivan and Abdullah the Butcher with Harley Race as our manager against Dusty, Dustin, Mike Graham, and who did they have in their corner? They had somebody in their corner, and Foley was the ref. It was like the most insane match. It was like all these legends and then me.
This sounds like the beginning of a joke.
So hang on. So did
CM Punk, Abdullah the Butcher, and Kevin Sullivan walk into a bar?
But the promoter.
hang on. Were you designated bumper then? Like, okay, we got to get someone in there that'll
100% by default, whether that was the idea or not. Like,
someone's got a bump in this match.
I looked around the room and I was like, I'm obviously bumping here, you know. And I just remember the promoter told me, called me up and he was like, yeah, I don't know who you are, but like Dusty suggested you and Race and like you know, all these guys say you're the guy that should be in this match, so I want to book you. And I was like, thanks. I don't know, it's just totally bizarre. But yeah, so like I wound up going in the business for myself, and I after I think Dusty might have pinned me, I don't know, I just ran at Abby to see what he would do, and he bumped me, and I got up and I ran at Kevin Sullivan, and he was like, he punched me. I just started feeding for everybody. Fed for Harley, fed for everybody. So like there was a match where I got to bump for Dusty, Harley, Abby, Kevin Sullivan, Mike Graham.
Is this on YouTube somewhere?
I hope so. I hope you'd be able to find it.
Love to
see it was at like a DoubleTree in Tampa. It was really weird.
DoubleTree?
Yeah. It was bizarre.
I kind of thought you were going to go down the All Japan route there when Elliotte asked that question. Now, you and I had a long talk yesterday about All Japan, our mutual love for it. Last night before I went to bed, I watched 93 Misawa and Kawada Budokan, half an hour of brilliance, just fantastic. I can recall first watching All Japan Pro. There was a Japanese store in the west end of Toronto called Sanko, and they would bring in video from Japan, a lot of MMA and All Japan and New Japan Pro. We get every couple of weeks
VHS tapes.
Yes, new tapes would come in, and that's when I fell in love with that group.
Yeah,
never saw anything like it. Fell in love with it instantly. Misawa was always my guy, and he was yours too.
Yep.
And you have the boots tattoo.
Yeah, I think when you look at pro wrestling as a whole, I think Misawa is easily one of the most important figures, and I think it's easy for people in North America to maybe not even know who he is. But I think just overall, like as a performer, even as Tiger Mask.
Well, the Madison Square Garden match with Dynamite Kid changed a lot of stuff.
Right.
No one had ever seen wrestling like that before.
But that was Sayama. That wasn't Misawa.
Oh, that wasn't Misawa. Sorry, that was Satoru Sayama.
That was Sayama. Tiger Mask 2 was Misawa.
Right.
And even that, like that would be like if Wayne Gretzky was like, you're Wayne Gretzky too. You know what I mean? Like it's Tiger Mask giving the mask to somebody else and letting somebody else carry on that gimmick was wild. But he, to me, was one of the most important figures in professional wrestling. Like his lineage from like Giant Baba, Jumbo Tsuruta, and him being a performer and carrying the mantle of Tiger Mask and leaving All Japan, creating Noah, being a booker. Like it's just everything. Nobody else did that. There's a lot of guys that ran their own companies. You know, the Funks ran a territory, all that stuff. He did like all that and more. And talk about a big match performer. Like Jesus Christ, this guy.
Well, it's interesting. See, I loved Misawa, but I always thought that as a performer in his peak, there was like a 2 or 3 year period where Kenta Kobashi was, you couldn't touch him.
Yeah, sure.
Was the best. And we got to see him mix with Toshiaki Kawada as well. And those three, I know you like to talk about the four pillars, but those three specifically.
I got a soft spot for Taue. Yeah.
You like Akira Taue?
I love Taue, yeah, so much.
Those three, to me, like any combination of those three, you can look up just randomly. And I go down these All Japan YouTube wormholes, come home from doing a late shift at Sportsnet, and before I go to bed, I'll watch an hour. I'll watch half an hour. and they still hold up.
Yeah,
Because they
there's-
look so different.
There's nothing like it, you know. And I always enjoyed my pro wrestling when it was presented as a sport. I think there's definitely still a way to do that. I know a lot of people say you can't jam the genie back into the bottle, but I think there definitely is a way to present it. I think when fans complain about having their intelligence insulted, it's because they're not presenting a product of what pro wrestling truly can be. You know, I think there's always that campiness and kind of goofiness to it.
Yeah.
That's just how some guys work. Some guys can shed that. And to me, it was always about skating the line of, okay, I know this is fake, but okay, those two guys hate each other. I can tell they really don't like each other. And like, that's what I always liked doing. And what I thought All Japan did very, very well was they kind of threw all that out the window and they made it more of a sport. It wasn't, you know, sometimes obviously there's storylines and a lot's lost in translation between Japanese and American culture, but they presented it straight up like, this is our baseball. This is it.
You know what I loved about it? The fans. Because the fans wouldn't bite on any near fall until you're like 20 minutes in.
Yeah.
The fans are like, no.
It's dangerous too, because then they conditioned them to do that. And but what it did is it also made flash pins and sudden finishes like mean so much more. And they did that every once in a while. You know, but yeah, you almost conditioned the fans to be like, this is the main event.
Hands, 20
Buckle
minutes.
up. Because, you know, oh, we're in the Budokan. This is going 50 minutes, you know? Yeah.
Speaking of fans getting mad, was there ever a match you wrestled where you thought your safety was seriously in jeopardy getting out of the ring?
It was always my goal. My biggest failure in life.
Was that you weren't wounded by fans?
This is a terrible thing to
Freddie
say.
Blassie used to brag about being stabbed, was it 6 times?
Because I was such a Piper guy when I was a kid. That I used to be obsessed when I was on the indies about just touching all those right buttons and driving people so crazy that they would jump into the ring. And I would always jokingly say, oh yeah, my goal is I want to get stabbed. Because you always hear the stories, crazy old Hat Pin Mary. That's where that came from. Mm-hmm. Old grandmas sticking guys in the ass with their hat pin and all that stuff. And like Piper got in the knife fights and, you know, obviously I look back at it now and I'm like, you don't want to get stabbed, but you know, like my heart was in the right place. You know what I mean? I wanted to incite this reaction out of the crowd. And I did that a lot. I proudly am the owner of the last near riot in the Cow Palace. That's on YouTube. Look that up.
And I think that's where Blassie once got stabbed.
Straight Edge Society. They're throwing so much junk at us, so much junk in the ring, and I keep cutting a promo. Jericho was begging me to stop, and we were wrestling. It was like a 6-man. We were wrestling like The Undertaker, Ray, and somebody else. And I knew we were in deep shit. And I figured once they hit The Undertaker's light, the lights went off. I said, this place is going to go off. So I told Serena to get under the ring. And I told Luke Gallows, I said, get back to me. And anybody who's not me, light them up. And they didn't kill the lights for Taker. That's how powder keg the place was. They didn't kill the lights.
Well, I can tell you this. That match is not on YouTube. The one with Dusty Rhodes and Mike Graham and Abdul the Butcher. But I am watching right now CM Punk ejects fans and causes melee at Cow Palace, San Francisco. We have to wrap this up.
Okay.
But like, I like wrestling. I am a thimbleful of love for wrestling than Jeff does. And I really thought the best way to end this podcast was if you cut an I'm better than you promo on Jeff Marek. If anybody deserves a near riot promo from you, it is Jeff Marek. So tell us, how are you better than Jeff Marek?
Oh gosh. It's old hat, right? It's like riding a bike. Can you ride a bike, Jeff?
No weak spots.
Can you ride a bike, Jeff?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
Can you wrestle, Jeff?
No.
No. What are you good at? What are you good at?
I will tell you a
What
story.
can you do?
I will
What can
tell
you do
a
better
story about
than me?
what I'm good at.
What can you do better than me?
After your promo.
I feel like your friend here wants me to tell you how much better I am at everything, and I think it might be easier to narrow it down to have you tell me what you're better at than me.
Correct.
It'll make this a lot shorter.
I'll tell you what.
Nothing. That's the answer. There is no. You can't. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say a mediocre man is always at his best, and that's why I'm better than you.
Well, show me a mediocre man in this room
You're looking
right now.
at one right now. This is the biggest humble brag promo you've ever seen in your life.
You're
Punk.
sub-mediocre. You wore the same suit 2 days in a row. You don't even have
I did change my
cutoff
socks and
on.
underwear.
I don't even know what shoes those are. Did you borrow those from your wife?
Oh, these are great. These are swims. These are fantastic.
I should have worn a suit. Just so I can prove that my wardrobe is even better than yours. Even my wardrobe, Jeff Marek, is better than yours.
That's it. You should be adding up, not summing up.
I was never good at math. That might be the one thing you're
You know
better
what?
at than me.
Here's that. There is nothing you can say to me that's going to be worse than what my wife said to me a couple of years ago.
I do.
That too.
That's
was
a wrap. That's
that
it.
was
Elliotte just slammed on you.
That was joke on. That was that.
Dunk on
That
him.
was joke on her. So I've been with my wife since 2008, and we're watching a hockey game late night on the iPad one day, and she turns to me and she says, "I finally figured out what you do in life." This was the best promo because it's a shoot. She says, "I finally figured out what you do in life. What your job is." I said, "This would be interesting. What do I do?" She goes, "You don't do anything. As a matter of fact, you do nothing. All you do in your job is talk about things that other people did. And that's it. You say that's offside. You say that's a bad pass. And you say, we'll be right back. That's all you do." You know what my comeback was? Dog face.
You can't say anything to them.
She was right.
No.
The best promos have that little bit, that kernel of truth. That's why that one stung. That's why that one stung.
I like it.
That's Claire Robinson, best promo in the business. She doesn't even know it.
Better than the one I just cut. That's for sure.
Punk, I want to end on one thing really quick. I want to
Yes.
ask you one thing.
Yes.
There's an old saying, your last mistake is often your best teacher.
Mm-hmm.
What was your last mistake?
I'm sure I've made dozens today. You know, mistake is such a negative connotation because I do think it is your best friend in a lot of ways because you do learn from it. So in a way, it winds up not being a mistake without naming names, without naming people. I tend to be a giver and I help a lot. And sometimes that help winds up biting me in the ass. And what I've learned from that is I have to not let being good to bad people affect how I treat my friends and family as a whole. Because it can make me recoil. And I can always just make more money.
That's a fantastic answer.
Great answer.
Thanks for a great podcast, Phil.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having fun with us in Chicago.
It's been a pleasure, honestly.
Let's talk to hockey players.
Yeah.
It was a real honor, like it really was.
Pleasure's mine, guys. Seriously. It's a lot of fun.